A few months had passed since Nicki had gone silent, allowing the police and the families of the abusers to breathe after a series of disturbing incidents. But Nicki had never truly stopped. She had been lying low, biding her time, plotting her revenge. She had taken down some of the men who had tormented her in the past, but there were still a few left. This time, her plan was even more dangerous, more calculated, and she was determined not to leave any stone unturned. Her next target was Musa, one of the men who had wronged her. Musa, the only child of his parents, had recently impregnated a young Muslim girl. His parents, thrilled by the prospect of a grandchild, had organized a grand nicki ceremony for the couple. Nicki, always one step ahead, knew this was a perfect opportunity. Musa would pay for what he had done, and she would make sure of it. The day of the nicki arrived, and the venue was lavishly decorated. Families and friends gathered, celebrating the union with laughter and joy. Nicki, disguised as one of the guests, sat quietly among the crowd, biding her time. She watched Musa closely, waiting for the right moment. Her heart raced, but her face betrayed nothing. As the ceremony proceeded, Musa, excited and carefree, stepped away from his friends to use the restroom. He walked down the hallway, his thoughts filled with the joy of the day, unaware of the danger lurking behind him. As he stood in front of the mirror, Nicki silently approached, her eyes looking with ease through the reflection. Musa froze. He recognized her instantly. Before he could speak, before he could beg for his life, Nicki moved swiftly. She clasped her hand over his mouth and plunged a knife into his body. Again and again. 5 times she struck him, her hand steady, her heart cold. Musa crumbled to the floor, his life slipping away as Nicki dropped a note beside his lifeless body. It is payback time, and I am loving it. Without a sign, she slipped out the back door, disappearing into the shadows. The murder sent shockwaves through the community, and the police, who had nearly forgotten about the previous killings, were forced to reopen the case. They began to dig deeper into the background of the victims, Tunde, David, and now Musa. Slowly, connections began to emerge. The boys had all attended the same schools, been involved in questionable activities, but no one had ever suspected what they had done to Nicki. It was a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Another month passed, and Nicki, pacing back and forth in her small dimly light room, could feel the fire of anger burning inside her. She wore a black top and ripped jeans, her eyes filled with cold rage as she remembered the pain her final targets, Victor and Michael, had caused her. They were her cousins, but they had never treated her like family. Instead, they had tormented her, humiliated her, made her life a living hell. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thought of her aunt Sarah, the woman who had raised her after her parents' death, and how she had tried to give Nicki a good life. But Victor and Michael had ruined everything. Her heart hardened as she smashed a bottle against the wall, glass shards scattering across the floor. She would not be weak. She had suffered too much, and now it is their turn. Victor and Michael were on their way to a celebration, dressed in fine African attire, when Nicki made her move. As they drove down a deserted road, their car was suddenly forced to a stop by another vehicle that had blocked their path. Victor, who was driving, slammed on the brakes, fear gripping him. The brothers exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what was happening. From the other car, Nicki emerged with 3 large men, all wearing masks. They moved quickly, opening the doors of Victor and Michael's car and dragging the terrified brothers out. Bound, they were thrown into the back of the van and driven to an old abandoned hut deep in the forest on the outskirts of the city. Inside the hut, the brothers were tied to a chair, their faces pale with fear. The marksmen left after being paid, leaving Nicki alone with her cousins. The brothers begged for their lives, tears streaming down their faces as they pleaded for forgiveness. But Nicki was unmoved. She reminded them of everything they had done to her, the way they had crushed her dreams, how they had made her life unbearable. She recounted her years on the street, how she had slept in an unfinished building, how she had nearly died after being bitten by a snake, and how a kind hunter had saved her life. She told them how she had vowed to make her abusers pay for every ounce of suffering they had caused her. For 3 days, she left them in the hut without food or water. Their cries for help went unanswered, their pleas falling on deaf ears. On the 3rd day, Nicki returned, bringing food and water. Victor and Michael, weak and desperate, couldn't help but eat. But what they didn't know was that the food was poisoned. As they swallowed the rice, Nicki watched them with a cruel smile on her face. Minutes later, the brothers began to writhe in agony, their bodies convulsed, their faces twisted in pain. Nicki stood over them, watching with satisfaction as they gasped for breath, their lives slipping away. When they finally lay still, Nicki dropped another note at the scene. It is payback time and I am loving it. After a few days, without any sign of her sons, Auntie Sarah began to grow increasingly worried. She reported Victor and Michael missing to the police, who launched a relentless search, but no trace of them could be found. After a few days, a hunter wandering deep in the forest stumbled upon an old abandoned hut. Exhausted, he decided to enter the hut to rest. As he opened the creaky door, what he found froze him in his tracks. Victor and Michael's lifeless body onto the ground, their faces pale and cold. Panicked, the hunter raced to the nearest police station in the city, breathlessly recounting what he had seen. Without hesitation, the police mobilized, sending out patrol vehicles and an ambulance to the scene. They followed the hunter through the forest to the old hut, where they confirmed the horrific sight. Victor and Michael's bodies were carefully removed from the crime scene after the police surveyed the area for clues. All they found was a note on the floor, eerily similar to the ones left at the other murders. The hut was immediately secured as a crime scene, and the bodies were transported to the mortuary. Later that day, officers arrived at Aunt Sarah's home. With heavy hearts, they informed her of the tragic death of her 2 sons. Upon hearing the devastating news, Auntie Sarah collapsed in shock. She was rushed to the hospital, where she lay in anguish, crying bitterly for her lost children. Meanwhile, Nicki, burdened by the weight of her actions and also knowing fully well that she had ended the lives of all her 5 abusers, decided it was time to come forward. She walked into the police station and confessed to the murders of all 5 of her abusers: Tunde, David, Musa, and her cousins, Victor and Michael. She asked the police to call the press, ready to tell the world her story. Soon, reporters and cameras flooded the station, and Nicki's confession was broadcast to the world. In her confession, Nicki detailed the years of torment and abuse she had suffered at the hands of these men, explaining how their cruelty had driven her to take justice into her own hands. Her story quickly went viral, spreading across televisions, radio, social media, and newspapers. People everywhere learned of the tragic tale of Nicki's abuse and revenge. Auntie Sarah, still in the hospital, heard the news that Nicki had been the one responsible for the death of her sons, Victor and Michael. Overcome with grief and disbelief, she couldn't stop crying. Nicki was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder. On the day of her court hearing, the courtroom was packed with onlookers, eager to hear the verdict. After reviewing all the evidence and Nicki's chilling confession, the judge found her guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to life imprisonment with hard labor. The story of Nicki's revenge serves as a reminder that actions have consequences, and that the pain we inflict on others can come back to haunt us in unimaginable ways. It also highlights the importance of kindness, empathy, and the need for parents to be present in their children's life, as neglect can lead to unimaginable heartbreak. The end. Hello beautiful people, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's Blessing Matthew, and I'm back again with the concluded part of the story. How are you guys doing? I hope you guys are fine. If this is the first time I'm seeing you, please do well to subscribe, like the video, drop me your comment, and lastly, please do not forget to share. Thank you, God bless you, and remember, I love you.